Leadership is the ability of an individual or a group of people to influence and guide followers or members of an organization, society, or team. But where you find in leadership the inability to lead the people to common goals and objectives, then of course there is a problem. Where is the meeting point for purposeful leadership and performance, and can both function independently? Well, Godwin Vaz is the Managing Director of Performance Transformation. He has deep and diverse experience in organizational and leadership transformation. He works with senior leaders to expand their vision, change mindset, and align on strategic priorities and outcomes to best achieve their vision. And he joins me on Top Talk. It's nice to have you come on the program, Mr. Vaz.
Great. Thank you for the welcome. Good to be here.
Good to see you too. In the last 2 decades, you've worked closely with leaders across sectors, across continents, and in diverse industries as well. What did you find to be the most needed element?
In leadership?
Yes.
I think there's 2 things. I think it's the vision of the leader. Visionary leadership. So they have a strong vision. Why is that important? Because it can overcome any fears, any rejections, any doubts, any setbacks, failures, attacks, if the vision is strong. And the vision has to be of a particular kind, that it's not just self-serving. It's good for the system they're in, which could be organization, government department, or country, whole society. I think that's the first. The second thing is self-awareness, is the biggest thing. The leader has to be aware of their weaknesses, strengths, fears, yearnings, gifts, passions. If they're not, they will be putting the blame on others rather than taking accountability themselves. Self-responsibility will be lost.
I would say self-responsibility, that's something that sounds very weighty.
Weighty meaning?
Meaning there's just so much expectations on such a person, right?
Yes. Yes, so there is a whole bunch of organizational research, right, that shows they studied companies that were went from good to great, and they stayed there for more than 10 years, right, and they're still there. And it showed that the leaders of those companies all shared certain things. The big one for me was that they were background when things were going well and foreground when things were going badly. Means they were willing to take the negative criticism and feedback. They took responsibility for what was happening. And when things were going well, they gave the praise to other people. I think that's a big part of a very self-aware, comfortable within myself type of leader. Rather than getting external approval and security, they have it within themselves.
So for you, what is the approach to get to optimize leadership and, of course, to enhance expertise?
In leadership?
Yes.
The starting point is getting feedback on the leader. So anonymous is better. So we need to know what are the strengths, the natural gifts, the blind spots, and the weaknesses of the leader. Once we have that, so much can change and transform in the whole system, whether it's societal, government, organizational. But without that, we're guessing. Or we're trying to fit every leader into one mold, which it doesn't work.
So perhaps we take them one after the other. One would say the strength. What does that mean?
Strengths means what do they do well that contributes positively to the government or the organization. So for some leaders, it's time management. For some leaders, it's they're good speakers. They're very good at conveying the vision and engaging people to the vision. Others need a lot of training for that, right? Some leaders are good at conflict management. Others are good at managing different stakeholders and getting agreement. They're good at negotiating and facilitating. So maximizing their strength is important. And equally important is working on their blind spots that they can't see that are leading to less positive outcomes or negative outcomes.
So if I find my blind spot as a leader, what do I do?
Then it's the humility to admit it and to then work on it. So that's where leadership development comes in. Okay, so many leaders work with us one-to-one for privacy and confidentiality. And the more courageous ones will work with their senior team on all of them developing and going to their next level of impact, of cooperative, supportive, visionary leadership.
Okay, you've worked across continents,
Mm-hmm.
across countries, industries,
Yes.
and what will be that experience you find that is lacking in Africa?
I think for Africa, and mind you, I'm very much in my research collection stage of trying to understand and getting the feedback. I think at this point, there's two things I think that's lacking and that's needed, right? If I can, probably going to upset some people, but I'm being honest with my assessment. I think the first thing is leaders need a bigger picture thinking, which means thinking beyond the short term to the longer term for Africa, for their countries. And bigger picture also means going beyond self-orientation to what's good for the stakeholder and myself. So we talk about that win-win is not enough, right? Like a senior leader of government or industry could do a deal which is very good for a stakeholder and the leader short term, but it's detrimental in the long term, okay? So a simple example of that, just a very mechanical example, is someone could sell a gun to a child. That's a win-win. The gun owner makes a profit, the child gets the gun. It's missing the third win, which is it good for the system, which could be society or family or a school, right? So I think it's thinking win-win-win is lacking here. And like I said, it's that's part of going from just what's good for me. For if I give people what's good for them and society, it will also benefit me, ultimately. You look at all the great leaders in history, we remember them because they were win-win-win. They weren't just all about themselves, but they still benefited themselves by helping others and helping the wider system. In this case, we're talking about society.
It sounds elementary, the example you've given, but it actually goes deep.
Very deep. The financial crisis was because of win-win. Okay, I'll give you a mortgage, you get the money, you can't pay it back, and then the whole system collapses because they're not thinking about the third win, which is the whole financial system. Okay, so the third win here could be food security, it could be fuel availability, it could be health. And I know something I want to talk about is it could be, the third win is thinking about youth empowerment, because the numbers of youth here is staggering, your statistics. I'm just so...
Over 70% of Nigeria's population
are young, under the age of 30.
Yeah.
And over 50% is under the age of 18. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So the third win has to be youth, because they're the future, right? So if I was a leader thinking about, what would make the biggest difference, it would be how can we empower youth to contribute to Nigeria? Nigerian economy, Nigeria family, Nigeria safety, Nigeria innovation, entrepreneurship for youth. We'll talk about solutions, I guess, at some point.
Yes.
Possible things.
Yes. But over time, for decades now, Nigeria has had a Ministry of Youth. I'll give the basic example, a Ministry of Youth in every administration, right? And have designed programs for young persons. But it will seem something is lacking.
Can I suggest what might be lacking?
Yeah.
In my experience, you have to include the people that you're trying to influence. Okay, so it's one thing, like a group of ministers or even a youth service organizing programs for the youth. It's another thing enrolling the youth in the design and the implementation of a program. So it's moving from a top-down to a collaborative design of interventions, whether it's policy or skills training. It's again feedback. We need feedback from the people you're trying to influence. What do they love? What are they disengaged with? What do they hate? What are they fearful of? And letting them input. That's the only time I've found that programs really work. So we have a principle. It's from the Stephen Covey, a great leadership trainer and speaker, which wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So one thing he said was that to get commitment, you need involvement. We found that very true. People are not going to commit to something unless they have input into it.
Oh, yeah.
Again, it needs very humble, courageous leadership to be open to feedback from, these young people. Or these women, like what would they know? Whatever it is. But they're the only ones that know. How would I know if I'm not that constituency, if I'm not that stakeholder group? So it's, we call it leader as facilitator, rather than leader as on-high controller. It's a very big mindset shift that leads to the behavior shift. So can I, as a leader, let those who are trying to help create the program or the policy? Takes a lot of dialogue skills, facilitating and not taking things personally, but it's having a learning orientation and curiosity rather than, am I going to get upset by this negative feedback? That doesn't really work in my experience.
So which comes first? Is it saying this is the program or this is the policy we want to do, or dialogue first with the young persons to come up, for them to be part of the discussion and agree and this is what we want?
Dialogue and statistics. Dialogue and measure. If you have data from your youth, you said there was a youth department. If you have data from there, use that, but definitely dialogue.
Most of the data comes from the National Bureau of Statistics. They do the numbers.
Okay, but it's based on talking to young people or not?
No, it's based on they carrying out the research and feeding every other arm of government with it.
Right, so that's again a power over model. We're talking about a power with model, that I give you power so that we both get empowered. Right, and then the final model, which really can transform a company or a country, is to foster power from within, which is self-empowerment, safety to speak up, resilience, all of that stuff, which we can talk about. It's been a big part of the programs that we've done, right?
Okay.
So my answer to that is, it's got to come from the youth rather than the Bureau of Statistics. They could be measuring the wrong thing, you don't know.
Oh yes, actually. So if you're going to give me an honest opinion between the public and private sector, which is more problematic for you to deal with?
The public sector, I'm going to say.
Why is that?
I don't know why, but I can tell you that, going back to what we talked about, the transformation requires visionary leaders with courage and flexibility, a humility to take difficult feedback and to learn rather than to get upset by it. I have noticed that, we look at one of the key things of transformational leadership, which is building trust. And one of the elements of trust is authenticity, being my honest self and my honest opinions. I suspect there's more of a fear of that in public office than with private leaders, right? That maybe if I show my weaknesses, it will show that I'm not a good leader or could be used against me. When in fact the reverse is true, but it's quite a risk. But if a government leader is listening to that, I encourage you to be authentic. That this is difficult for us to pursue. We've listened to the people and we're going to do it. We're anxious about it, but we're going to do it. To just be, I find the public sector leaders can be more, and maybe the people around them are more receptive to it, I'm not sure, but can be more honest about what they want and what they're fearing, and then take the necessary action anyway. Maybe the public scrutiny of a public sector leader is higher. I'm not sure the cause of it, but if there's lack of openness to change and honesty with the situation, people like myself, a change consultant, can't really help because the problems aren't being admitted to, right? So private, up until this point, is easier to work with for transformational change. Okay. I hope that changes.
Okay, so what are the peculiarities with the private sector?
The peculiarities?
Yeah.
That make it work? So it's a courageous leader that has high self-awareness and self-trust. Okay, I find that I can find them more in the private sector.
Perhaps because they know if they don't deliver, they get fired.
Yes, and they can go somewhere else.
Yes.
They can go somewhere else. In fact, they're trying something bold in the marketplace will lead to a better reputation than just status quo, right? Depending, I mean, as long as they don't fail drastically. So it's courage, it's strong vision, the ability to communicate the vision, and it's a high self-awareness, self-trust. Usually the guys that have sponsored transformational change for usually we've had 90,000 people, 120,000 people organizations, and then it's moved to countrywide after they've done their particular city. They don't mind failing. They can learn from failure. They're not averse to failing because they have this strong sense of self-trust, I think, and self-resilience. So we're talking about inner leadership now. The elements of inner leadership really is what I'm answering. So when we find that one leader that really understands that external leadership depends on self-leadership and we call it the inner journey of leadership, they can, because they're role modeling it, they can use someone like us to spread it through the top team and then down through the whole organization. But because they're living the fear of it, they believe in it. If a leader, so leap of faith, they've taken a leap of faith in their life. Just to have a vision of drastic change is a leap of faith. And a massive leap of self-trust and putting yourself on the line. Right? So I think they have such a belief in the vision, they know that even if it fails, they've succeeded because they've lived true to their values and true to who they are.
So for the public service officials now, the leaders, can they take the risk of failure?
This is the question. So maybe it requires some support in self-leadership before that happens. If you have a leader that already has that, the country will change. Right? They don't need people like me. They usually find people like me to just spread it, right? So I'm just a facilitator of large-scale change. But you need someone at the top with the courage and the awareness and the vision to start the process.
You've been involved. We've agreed on that, but I just want to look at these countries: Brazil, China, US, Indonesia, Argentina, Thailand, Australia, Malaysia, Canada, Singapore, India. Which is your favorite destination?
Oh, that's an unfair question. I'm going to be really honest with you. So it depends. When you travel as much as I do, it really depends on some countries. It's the culture and the people, right? Some countries, it's the openness to change and the spiritual nature. I think change management is not just rational, it's emotional and spiritual. Spiritual meaning a higher purpose than just meeting my own needs. Okay, so if I answer it according to that, wow, I think India and Thailand are my favorites for culture and people. For emotional EQ, RQ, and spirituality, I think it's India. And oddly, Italy. Like, people find that odd, right? They're like, how is it Italy? But there is a real connection to higher values in Italy.
Really?
I feel, yeah. Yeah, I go there regularly every year, and I go to India. I was born in India, so I have relatives there, and it's like homecoming for me, spiritual, emotional homecoming. But culturally, I live a lot in Thailand and Bali. So the culture and the people there are very special.
There's just something about the Asian countries. What is that?
Oh, okay. I think this is relevant to leadership and transformation too. I think human beings are holistic. We're not just one small thing, right? So your work self could be super rational if you say you're an engineer or an accountant. But I think that lacks joy because you're not looking at the other elements of being a full human, which is the emotional and the spiritual. In my experience, the Asian countries have all three. Maybe because of history, maybe because of mystical traditions. And modernization certainly has made Asian countries be more organized and rational, thank goodness, because infrastructure is better, rule of law is there, safety is there. But the deeper sense of spirit and heart was already there. I think it was already there. And if you look at Western countries, they're yearning for spirit and heart. I know that from Australia. I know that from friends in America. I mean, look at America, right? It's fighting between head and heart, I think, at the moment. Head, heart, and spirit.
Yeah.
So I think perhaps that's what it is. And the fourth element of being human is being really grounded in nature and the body. I think Africa has that. That's why I like coming here.
Really?
It's a very embodied culture. Look at your dance, look at your music. I say to my Western friends, you know, the best of the music that you love probably started in Africa.
That's true.
You look at rhythm and blues, soul. I'm a big fan. I'm a teacher of Latin dance.
Okay.
All of that started here, then went to Cuba, but the beats were from here. So the being in the body, why is that powerful? We use the body a lot for transformational work. It creates safety. I learned this from gurus in India. If you want to transform trauma, you have to have, the body has to be a container of emotions. So the more that you are in the body, the more you can handle intense emotions. And from my experience in Africa previously, it's very funny. I did like really deep body work with executives, very senior executives from government, private, and the army in Kenya.
Okay.
And I had them dancing on day one, right? In Australia, that would take like the third workshop, third day, probably 6 months to build up that level of trust. They just went for it. So this,
Maybe because we love to party.
yeah, you love to party, and the beauty of partying is it lets go of the mind. The rational mind can be stuck in the past. I love this definition of the mind because the mind is not enough for transformational change. It's saying that the mind is just memories of the past. And from that, we predict the future. But what if the future is different to what you've experienced?
Yeah.
And for transformation, it has to be different. So we say that transformational change, that's why leaders have to be courageous to take a leap of faith. Transformational change is always about what's unimagined. If you're imagining it too clearly, you're doing it from the past. And I find that in getting in the body helps you let go of the control and over-control of the mind and the over-wanting to predict everything, which doesn't lead to massive change. It's just going to be incremental change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I'm going to hold your thoughts on that because it's time for us to take our very first break on the program, and we will be back shortly after this time out. Welcome back, and I have been conversing with Mr. Godwin Verse, and it's really lovely having to share all these insights with me because I'm also getting to benefit much more. Before we went on the break, you made a comment that really caught my attention, which is the spirituality of the Asians. And one will look at it that in Africa, we're very religious people. We're Christians, we're Muslims, and we've got lots of other faiths being practiced here. And in fact, I think in Nigeria, we have the highest number of churches and mosques, if I'm not mistaken, on the continent.
Wow.
And one will wonder, if we're this spiritual, or we claim to be people of faith, why isn't it showing in the other things that we do?
Yes. Okay. So I want to make a distinction between religious and spiritual.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So religious is the organized religion. So it could be Islam, could be Judaism, could be Christianity. So that is different to spirituality, which I think is a broader umbrella, that you believe there's something, right? There is a loving force out there. Okay. So I think for transformational change, it's about two things. It's about a faithfulness to your own path, which could be religious or spiritual, and it's a great tolerance to other religions and even someone with no religion. So it's a compassion and a respect for people's right to choose. Okay, and at the same time, it's holding all people, regardless of what faith you are in or not in, to a higher standard of behavior and mindset. Okay, so I think I'm calling that, and we call that higher universal values and principles. So it could be something like respect. It could be something like kindness. It could be something like how do you build trust? Okay, So when we do RQ training, which is relationship intelligence, so EQ is not enough. EQ is important for empathy. I think for inner leadership, one key thing is, have I got enough empathy for all people who are different to me, so that I can find an area of agreement and win-win. Okay. If I am just in my religion and everyone else is wrong, I'm not going to have empathy for other views. It's going to be polarizing, not collaborative, and not harmonizing, not unity. It'll be like separation. So I would say that could be one problem area. Thinking one right way rather than my way is right for me. How can I respect other people's ways and find common ground? That's how I would answer that.
Okay, we're told that we're first spiritual beings before being physical beings.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And you've also made reference to that at the course of this discussion, that it's from within you begin to exhibit the without.
Yes.
So really, it will look like at a point when you take a very good look at African leaders, are they thinking within first, or they're thinking from the outside to the inside?
You always look at the results of what's happening. I would hazard a guess that they're thinking from without. So we have a key term called external authority, right? So external authority means I'm going to give my authority to external forces, feedback. Do people like me? What's my approval? What's my status from what people are saying? The problem with that is that you lose yourself, you lose your courage, you lose your power. So the shift to inner leadership is internal authority. What do I think of myself? Who am I? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And a big one, what are my fears? How do I run? How do I attack? If you're aware of that, you'll be a better leader, right? Because you'll start to manage and heal that. I'm going to use the word healing. Because leadership's not just about empowerment, that's future. It's healing the past so that you can be more present with yourself and with other people, okay? So, yes, it's absolutely right. So that's why we talk about the inner journey of leadership. If you can't heal and lead yourself, you're going to be too dependent on other people's opinion of you, or fearing other people's opinion of you. So you give your power away to external forces rather than internal conviction.
So we've seen some countries, just I don't know of any African country that does an approval rating. Does that count?
An approval rating?
Approval
What does that
rating
mean?
for leaders. We get to see countries do some polls for people to rate their leaders, to know if they've approved of them or whichever decision they're taking. Does that count?
I think it's win-win-win again. I think that's an important metric for the leader, just to get some feedback. How they're being perceived, what's the impact like, and are they approving of themselves with their conscience? Am I living true to my values? Is the internal approval rating. Am I in integrity or not? Am I being true to my vision and values or not? That's the internal approval. That actually, it's called character rather than personality. So personality is what others are saying. Character is what I'm doing, whether it's easy or not, whether I get external approval or not. It's just the right thing to do, according to my conscience, according to my values. Does this distinction make sense?
It does.
I think it's both. I think a leader that ignores external ratings is probably not going to go far. Right? And it's good feedback for a leader to know how am I being perceived, what's my impact like, am I on track, off track with the constituents or with my employees or whoever it is. And at the same time, I've got external approval, but I really have lost my integrity. That's not sustainable. That's a leader that's going to burn out or become very narcissistic.
Oh, well, we don't need any of them.
We don't need that. We've had enough of that.
Yes, and also at this part where we are, you get to see leaders rise above the institutions. and you get to see some form of personalization, my agency, my ministry, my commission. What does that do to service delivery?
Yes, it's again taking the sphere of, it's a bigger picture thinking, right? So what it does to service delivery is it just makes it not as impactful as it could be. It's selfish, it's self-orientation again. And so we've talked about win-win-win, right? So it's got to be beyond the third win being for my department. It's got to be for Nigeria, or it's got to be for Africa. So it's expanding the vision for a bigger impact. And if it's not good for Nigeria, why am I doing this? It's short term and it's probably just self-orientation. So how can I think long term and for the bigger system, which is not just my team? It could be even I'm doing it for my team, forget everyone else. It's going to damage, our brand or how the public see us. That's thinking more short term and self. Self meaning just my particular tribe. So how can it be good both for my tribe and the bigger tribe? And you know what, in my experience, people see those kind of leaders and you start to build trust and a following because they can see that you're not in it just for you. You are getting benefit for you, you've got the personal win, but it comes from you're doing it for the immediate, but you're also doing it for the wider community and the long term. I think people can see that kind of leader, but it's also about the leader being able to communicate win-win-win. This is why I'm doing this decision, because it's better for medium term, it's better for more constituencies in Nigeria.
So how will you be assessing African leaders, their relationship? Because you get to see that for other continents, the development is together. But for Africa, it doesn't look that way.
What does it look like instead?
It's like everyone is, yes, we are a continental body with a continental union, but every region, every block is operating in silos.
Yeah, that's a big problem. Even in organizations, it's breaking down silo thinking, right? So the key, again, I think, is a collaboration mindset, which is dialogue, once more, right? So, you talk about the different religions in Nigeria. So is there inter-religious dialogue happening? Just as an example, okay? As similar question for government, is there inter-agency dialogue, like really factored in as a discipline, where decisions are made where it's good for all the parties concerned, or the majority. You're not always going to get it perfectly right? You have to make, sometimes people will be upset and nothing's perfect. So I think it's that sense of asking and dialoguing rather than telling and fighting for what's mine. Does this make sense, the difference? Okay, and that takes time. It takes skills as well. So not everyone is born with facilitative negotiation skills. Okay, especially if you grew up in a very paternalistic system where it's just do what I tell you or there's punishment. Right? So this level of, it's an evolution. We talk about leaders evolving from power over to process-driven leadership, which is also, it's important because it's got efficiency in it. Things happen faster and with consistency. And then the next evolution of that is collaborative, supportive leadership, which requires empathy, negotiation skills, dialogue skills. It's RQ, really we're talking about relationship intelligence and emotional intelligence skills, and visionary leadership. Some people are born with it, it's very rare. But most of us, I think 96% of the leaders I've come across, it had to be supported, honed and trained. And it was frightening for them.
Yeah, I was going to really ask about leadership training. Are we doing enough leadership training here?
Definitely not. I'm guessing by looking at the situation, right? So you look at other countries in the world that have really mandated leadership training in government and for the youth. I think for Nigeria it's got to be both, and for entrepreneurs. I think one of the things, you look at a country like Australia and America, such an amazing amount of trades and skills training, as well as entrepreneur hubs, right? Innovation hubs. I'm not sure if Nigeria is ready for that, but if you've got this great youth population, I think they're yearning for entrepreneurial skills. So that's one, that's like the bottom end, right? And then at the top end, to support that, it's leadership development training is really necessary, so that there's a standard of ethics, of empathy, of respect, of even accountability, responsibility. I don't think it comes naturally to us as human beings. And I think we know this from families, right? We do what the example is doing. We do what the mother's doing, what the father's doing. So transformational change is leader-led. So a big part of big system change is just unconsciously we role model the people at the top. And I think leaders listening would agree with this. Parents, you would know. It's like, wow, the children are starting to say your words. Where did they learn that? And they've forgotten that they got it from you. But everyone's listening and watching what the leader does and says. So we talk about you need mindset training to change the thinking. You need emotional pattern training, right? So, we talk about, and the third one is behavioral training, right? Which is, we know about code of conduct. But to me, that's really the least important. It's got to be a code of thinking. We're going to think like this now. And it could be, we're going to be more ethical, we're going to be more accountable, we're going to be more transparent. So the mindset shift is that transparency builds trust. Or we're going to be authentic with each other. Maybe not even the public, we're not ready. We're going to be really real with each other, which we train groups to do, right? Because then they don't trust themselves if that's not there. And the last one, so it's mindset, we call it heart set. What are the emotional patterns of fear or hope, courage or despair, persistence or giving up? Like what emotion, this is a good question for Africa, like what emotion do we love feeling that we want all people to feel more? Like I noticed there's a lot of latent joy in Africa. You guys know how to party, as you said before. I think Africa, South America, that's part of the cultural essence of a country, which you don't want to lose as you modernize. So you want to keep the best of the culture. And a big part of that is the behavior standards, which probably definitely need changing. But you want to keep the best of what's our best traditions. When we're at our best, what emotions are we feeling? I think there's a lot of joy here. When you're at your best, right? And how do you bring that into the workplace? That kind of African flavor. And, obviously, policies, processes, fairness, justice, psychological safety, all of that is part of it. But the leaders have to role model the best mindsets, the best emotions, and the best behaviors. So we talk about not just a code of conduct, but a code of thinking and a code of feeling that everyone can kind of commit to or get feedback on. It's like we don't do that here anymore. We don't do that. We're not focused on that emotion of despair or complaint. We're focused on, well, how are we progressing, as an example.
So for you, entering any jurisdiction at all, when we're talking about preserving the culture and, of course, our thinking, what is your first impression? How do you gauge your first impression when you get into a jurisdiction for the very first time? What do you expect to see?
When I move into a country or into an organization?
Yes, a country now.
A country. What am I looking at? Oh, that's a great question. Okay. So I'm looking at, there's some physical things and there's some invisible things, I think, that you can just feel. So the physical things is I'm looking at just simple things like infrastructure, the roads, the lighting, all of that kind of just the physical. How easy is it for people to move around quickly, efficiently, and safely? Okay, so it just gives me so the infrastructure here is so different to Lagos, so different to Port Harcourt, which we just came from. So I also am looking at the subcultures within a country, right, as well as what's in common. So I'm looking at physical things like even hospitals, and I'm always asking about education with everyone I meet. Like, what's the education like? How would you rate it for your child? Tell me the strengths, tell me what you're not happy with. So health, education, infrastructure, I look at that, right? Public transport is a really good way of assessing what's important to this country. Is it important or not? Right? Is it affordable or not? In some countries it's free. Right? So that says a lot about the values of the leadership at the top again. So that's the physical stuff. Then on the all-important, more important invisible side, I'm looking at how people are relating to each other and what they are doing, how they see work and how they see leisure. I think I'm really always looking at that. That tells me, do they like work or hate work, right? I always ask the question, how hard is it to start a business here? It tells me the level of entrepreneurial energy in a country. And some people say, oh, easy. And some countries, even in Europe, say, oh, it's a nightmare, it's 4, 5, 6 months. Some countries it's 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Right? Which then that shows that the government and the societal norms, the mindset is we support people that have an idea and want to contribute, want to bring value to the marketplace and be entrepreneurs.
So for those countries, I'm sorry to cut you in, for those countries who take as little as 3 days, what's a takeaway from them?
From the entrepreneurs or the
yes,
countries?
For the countries themselves.
Oh, they want to foster. So I'll give you an example of Australia. The biggest business structure is the sole trader, the single person running a business, usually with the wife or husband doing something, accounting or something, right? But it's one person. So the majority of business structure in Australia is not partnership, it's not a team of 5 or 10 or a big organization, it's a sole trader. So what it shows is that there's a willingness to trust people to bring value to the marketplace quickly. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But then the evolution of that is countries, you look at Northern Europe even more so, that do entrepreneurial training for free, provided by the government, and Australia started that as well. I think some of the North American cities are looking at this. So we're not going to only make it easy, we're going to help you succeed. Okay, because it brings more services and more value to the economy that the government can't do, right? The government can't provide every need in a country, but individuals can. And then when there's competitors, the standard can raise, right? If there's healthy competition. So innovation, entrepreneurship, it shows a willingness for expansion and growth, trusting people, right? And supporting having innovation entrepreneurial hubs is supporting that we want people to succeed in bringing value, in making things easier, better, faster, and meeting more needs in our country. Is that answers the question?
This means essentially that the government is making the entire space very easy for people to succeed.
Yes.
Without the government doing much more in creating jobs.
Yes, correct. Yes, correct. So the jobs come from, and the value comes from, and the economic activity comes from small and medium businesses, and even large businesses.
Okay, I'm going to hold you on this because we're going on our second break, and of course we'll be back in a short while. It's nice to know you're still out there, staying in tune with us, and we move back to our conversation with Mr. Vaz, and it will seem like this climb we need a lot of services from you.
Right, that's why I've been brought here. That's why I've been brought here by my collaborators.
Okay, so how long will you be around here?
Well, my plan is to come back regularly to Nigeria. This is my research trip. And wonderful to have this opportunity to just, educate and learn. I'm learning a lot. I'm not intervening yet. I still need to get a lot of feedback. But I will be back. My plan is every 3 to 4 months to come back to Nigeria.
Okay.
Yeah, and being in Asia, it's not far compared to Australia.
Oh, actually, that's quite a far place.
From everywhere.
So for leaders traveling, does it help in taking decisions?
Traveling.
Yes, like you've been to many places, and you could give me instances just at the tip of your fingers for leaders traveling.
Yes. So I'm going to say for every Nigerian, right? Even traveling out of your city to another city, because we talked about the subcultures are so different, right? So in my experience, there's two ways to transform your mind and your life. Education is one, knowledge, which now we have the gift, amazing, which I didn't have when I started, the gift of the internet. There's so many podcasts, YouTubes. I say the fastest way to transform your life is to find a good mentor. So when I started, it was books, right? Now, young people, government people, corporate people, anybody, mother, father, grandmother, child, there's so much information out there that it just requires repetition and acting on the knowledge. Not just knowledge, but knowledge acted on. That's the first way. Okay, knowledge that's useful and you act on it. The second biggest way to expand is travel. Having the privilege and honor of working with university students in various countries, they ask me what about travel, and I say it's worth one month of travel is about 9 months of university.
Oh wow!
Right? If you go to a culture very different to yours, and really listen to what they're doing that in your culture is wrong, but they're happy. Right? So it's realizing that with culture, it's all made up. And we're just, all of us in different countries and cities are trying to do what is leading to fulfillment, right? Safety, fulfillment, connection. But the rules are very different in different places. So maybe if you're a government leader, you travel to another country, you can bring back something they do that could really work here in Nigeria. I think that's how I have been able to help different places. I take the best. I'm like, I think what they're doing over there would really work here. Some things won't. So you have to be, we talked about, so it's cultural intelligence, right? Travel also builds cultural intelligence, which is knowing that the values and standards in different places can be completely different, but it works.
But it works.
It works for that place.
Yes, because our leaders here travel a lot. Travel a lot, but it wouldn't look like we're bringing in any lessons from these other destinations.
Yeah, so maybe that needs to be more of a project, a learning project. So I know many countries have gone to Northern Europe, Scandinavian countries, to learn education practices, and they've let their teachers go there or lecturers go there for 1 to 6 months and bring back whatever could work in their own home country context. And not all of it works. Or sometimes it needs to be modified for the Nigerian context. But the principle could really help children learn, or university students learn. Or people going for a trade skill could help them develop that more effectively. So it's traveling is one thing, but it's going after what am I going to learn that I can bring back to help Nigeria. Otherwise you're just traveling to travel, right? Just to meet various people. So it's having that mindset of extrapolation. What can I extrapolate from there and bring it to my context? And continuous learning, I guess.
So you said earlier that about 90% of leaders actually need to be trained, right? And so I'm wondering, really, at what age do we start teaching children or young adults to assume leadership roles?
That's an exciting question.
Yes.
Yeah, I think for this is going to shock some people, I think for self-leadership, early teens. Really early. Self-leadership, the ability to lead yourself, to lead your mind, to be more positive and more respectful, more constructive, to lead your emotions, to lead your habits and disciplines. That, did anyone tell you about emotional regulation in school? Did anyone train you or me in empathy? Zero. Right? But if you train that in high school, it's going to make for a different society, right? Where people are going after win-win or win-win-win. Did anyone train us in conflict management? No, I didn't get that. I got it way too late in the 20s, after breakdown of relationships and breakdown of trust. Did anyone teach us in how to repair broken trust? Imagine if you taught that in school, right? So mental mastery, emotional mastery, we don't call it spiritual mastery, we call it energy mastery. just so that we encapsulate everybody, spiritual or not, right? So that's things like values, your purpose in life, like what your gifts are, your God-given gifts, your life-given gifts. That can be taught in school. It can easily be taught in school.
Yeah, because I actually see the Asians do so much more
Yes.
of that, and of course you see them also teach teamwork to kids.
Yeah, meditation.
And, yes,
right, breathing.
yes, and so you find they hardly fall sick.
Yes, they hardly fall sick, and then productivity is going to go up in the workplace. The economy benefits, right?
Yes.
And one thing I've been thinking about, because I'm traveling, is I would love to bring the best of what I've seen in Indian education here, which is values-based education, right? Not just knowledge-based, but teaching children a little bit about, okay, what are the highest Nigerian values we want to, human values, that we want to impart in all Nigerians, and embedding that into how geography is taught, right? How the children relate to each other. So it's values-based education, not just outcomes and knowledge-based education. I think could work really well here because it would determine future leaders.
I think the recent curriculum we have, the one that the primary school students are using, they have this subject they call national value education.
Right.
But for other people, the younger adults, they didn't get that.
Right, they missed out. Yeah,
Yes.
maybe there's a way of giving them a short form of it or some boot camps in it, right? Because otherwise they will judge the younger ones as like, this is weird, just do it. Doesn't matter about these values things.
Yes.
So to change a whole system, you have to embed some of the principles in the whole system, right? Otherwise there's going to be misunderstanding.
Okay, a misunderstanding. I really want you to also dot the spaces, if I may use that word, for our young adults now. Those who didn't get this kind of education, really, how do we close the gap?
Yeah, so I think large scale, I've done some of it in Lagos, right? Large scale sponsored, either corporately sponsored or government sponsored, doesn't matter. Even if it's partially sponsored, right? And schools and parents put in the rest. It's up to the bodies that be. I think you could do large-scale training on mental mastery, say, character development, purpose and values and principles. It can be a half-day program or a series of half-day programs. And then what I have found worked is to train people that will embed this widespread across schools. So to train agents of change, right? So it could be teachers, it could even be a parent. It could be certain parents that have the skill of communication and that they are given training by an organization like us or any organization that does, character, mindset mastery, emotional mastery. And then they embed it in their schools. They support it in a longer term. So it's not just a once-off. So they can do like a big training to get the experience of it. Then it's followed up in the community or the church or the school. So you take church leaders or school delegates that are they're chosen. They can't just be anyone. It has to be someone that we know usually who would be good at it. And they then nurture it in all of the years. They can even share it with the whole staff back at their school or the whole youth ministry in their church or in their mosque, whatever it is. So it's kind of choosing I think it's letting like a large number of young people experience it and then following it up in their community, whether it's a temple, a mosque, a church or a school.
Okay.
That really works.
Okay, should that be government-driven or private-driven?
It can be either. I mean, it's better really if it's government-driven because it's showing a commitment from the government in the empowerment of the youth. Because what I'm hearing and seeing is that there's massive discontent from the youth towards the government. So, I was asked a really interesting question of a TV show in Lagos. Do you start at the top and the bottom? And I said both, which is what we're talking about. So leaders can't, you can, but it's just going to take a decade rather than a year. Leaders can do what a lot of leaders do, which is fix my staff. Just fix the youth. We don't want to change. But if the leaders change as well as the people that they're trying to empower, then the whole system shifts really powerfully and more quickly.
Okay.
Because if all you do is empower the so-called masses, the leaders get more insecure. Because these guys get more assertive. And if all you do is empower the top, the other people get more angry. Because it's like, well, how can we trust you? Judging by the past.
I must sincerely thank you, Mr. Godwin, for making our time for this conversation, and I'm hoping that we get to bring you back again.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
Would love that.
thank you. And that's the much we have for you on this episode of the program. My name is Leah Katung Babatunde. Enjoy the rest of your day.